Greetings and welcome back to room 303 in our chats with Emily, as we are calling our readings through the poetry of Emily Dickinson. We are in the Johnson edition. We are now at poem 259, Good Night, which put the candle out. Now, this is an interesting little poem, rarely anthologized. There's going to be a multiplicity of ways that we can read a poem like this one. Now, in some ways, we're back to Emily, her love of light and the like. Of course, Plato's Republic 7 will be playing here as well in the back of our minds. Our assumptions are that you've been following our stuff at learnstrong.net, down that left-hand side, chats with Emily, our playlist. I'm hopeful that you've already worked through our set of introductory comments. I'm hopeful that you've already worked through our preceding 258 poems. We just finished with 258. There's a certain slant of light. Now, when we talk about light, physically light, within Emily's life and the life that she lived, there's an interesting quote that the great scholar Sewell will make after quoting Albert Parr, who says it this way. We got to remember that in Amherst, in Emily's day, quote, no street lamps brightened the paths along the unpaved roads. At night, each house became a little island where indoors the family gathered around an oil lamp after dark and went to bed by the light of a tallow candle, end quote. It is, of course, always remarkable when we think about the fact that in the time of Emily's life, there's no lighting like we know. So everything is by candlelight, or of course by the oil of the lamps that are lit. And in that regards, darkness and light is something way more understood by those folks. Now, in some ways, we'll read this poem as the possibility that we're back to Emily's concern about her poems not being accepted, not being published. Some have read this as another Sam Boyle's poem, and Sam himself is the jealous Zephyr that's at play here. I think there's as well some possibility of Chaucer's Canterbury Tales here, and we'll see how we understand it as we read the poem. Good night, which put the candle out. A jealous Zephyr, not a doubt. Ah, friend, you little knew how long at that celestial wick the angels labored diligent, extinguished now for you. It might have been the lighthouse spark some sailor rowing in the dark had importuned to see. It might have been the waning lamp that lit the drummer from the camp to pure revelry. Now, some have pointed out the possibility that Emily has said goodnight to her family and is in fact going up the stairs carrying with her candle, when in fact the candle flame goes out and she's maybe in the dark. Certainly, I think you can read the poem that way, but I think it's more possible that this is a poem of metaphor. That is to say, Emily is asking who put out the light. And what light are we speaking about here? Well, it's obviously the light of publishing if you read the poem this way. Notice, good night, which put the candle out, is interesting, and it's not who put the candle out. And then she'll say it, a jealous Zephyr. Now, some have read this as Sam Boyle's, that is to say, he didn't want her stuff to be published. There's any number of possible candidates here. Think about Zephyr as it relates to those opening lines of Canterbury Tale, when the Zephyr, the wind, is understood to be the wind that will awaken everything in the spring with his sweet sour shoot and all of that, right? By the way, when we get to poem 1312, it's only the use of the breeze of the spring, the inspiration. And then she'll say it, friend, with that formulation of friend, we've seen this a few times. You little knew how long at that celestial wick the angels labored diligent. Are we talking about Emily's poems here and her inspiration in that celestial wick? And then the angels will remind us of poem 231 that we've already covered. And then extinguished, her other use of that is in poem 354. Now, for you. Now, it's interesting, this use of the word for. Does for here mean because of you? In other words, you're the reason that the candle went out? Or rather, whatever it was being produced was for you. And then two, it might. It might have been the lighthouse spark. And again, this use of wick and spark makes us think that she's talking about maybe the divine spark, the spark of inspiration and the light. Some sailor, and then what an amazing word picture, rowing in the dark. This idea that you've got a sailor out there rowing in the dark. Is this Emily as poet, seeing that her poetic attempts are like rowing in the dark? Had importuned to see. We can't help but think, of course, of Beowulf's lighthouse at the conclusion of Beowulf, that he asks for that Beowulf's Barrow, Beowulf's lighthouse, as he can be remembered. It might have been, and now this is a even more tragic word picture, the waning lamp that, we're back to, again, the candle, that lit the drummer from the camp to pure revelry. The revelry is only used one time in all of her poetry, and it's here. In other words, the light that was showing the young drummer boy his way to heaven. Obviously, we think about the drummer boys in the Civil War themselves. What is going on in this poem at 2A in terms of themes, messages? I think that the spark of inspiration is being referenced here, and I think her argument is that it can so easily be extinguished. It is such a precious thing, that spark that allows for the sailor to make it in, for the young drummer boy to find his way to heaven. To be, well, obviously the central metaphor here is understood as that candle that went out, and who put it out, and how dare it was put out. At 3A, I've mentioned, of course, Chaucer and those opening lines, and the idea of the zephyr that blows, that brings about the awakening, right? And you can think about any number of ways that that gets played out in literature as well. Finally, at 3B, what was a time when you felt like the spark was starting to go out in your life and you wanted to know who put out the spark and who's responsible for it? Thank you.